Right. Get my giant timer going. All right, my name is Mason Robb, and I'm going to be talking about the ethics of autonomous vehicles and who is really accountable for tragedy. Now, first, I'm going to talk about the stakes of this and why would this be relevant or important to us as engineers and just citizens of the world. First of all, these are police reports for accidents and fatalities from 2021. So obviously, these are large numbers, about 6 million accidents and close to 40,000 fatalities were reported by police. And down here below is the market size in thousands of units for autonomous vehicles, so vehicles without drivers. And this study was done in 2022 when it was about 17,000, and it's projected to be closer to 125,000 in the year 2030. So in such a dangerous environment that has many accidents and fatalities, it's important that autonomous vehicles would have safety precautions and to an extent hold or carry out the ethical principles of normal humans. We also have to define what is an autonomous vehicle. So the SAE, or Society of Automotive Engineers, actually defines 6 levels of self-driving cars, and this goes all the way from level 1, which is a vehicle that has no qualities at all. It's just your typical car that you'd imagine where the human does everything involved in it, all the way up through 6, which is a vehicle that might not even have a steering wheel or even the ability to have a person man the vehicle. One important place to see a cutoff here, because it's really a spectrum of control being transferred from a person to completely a machine or computer program, is between 4 and 5. Up till number 4, you start getting more and more different qualities of the vehicle that are not controlled by the driver. But between 4 and 5 is the cutoff of humans not needing to pay any attention to the road. And in certain circumstances, people at 5 and 6 can actually let the car do everything. The car makes all the reactions and follows all the road rules, and there's no need for the person, or hypothetically, there would be no need for the person to interfere in what the car is doing. But obviously, this isn't the case because there have been incidents and programs don't always run perfectly. With the technical challenges of this, I'm going to start off. This is a model up here of different components of an autonomous vehicle. It has a LiDAR, camera, and radar are the main 3 that almost every autonomous car has. And these are used to pretty much see the environment and have multiple different ways of just evaluating the surroundings. So you kind of have ways to double check yourself. But they can be interfered with, and not all of them always work perfectly. Some of these technical challenges that come with those components include human and object identification. So this is just the ability of the car, like it's like quote unquote senses that a human might have while they're driving. This is the way that the car does that. Some of these include people or animals and road signs and construction. So depending on where you are or what you're doing, a person, it might be hard to identify, say they're wearing something different. Or even in some cases, it has difficulty identifying people of darker skin tones, so they're more likely statistically to hit those people. And with construction and road signs, not everything is kept up perfectly. Everybody knows driving around that sometimes you can't see lines clearly on roads, or signs fall over from conditions, or you try to go somewhere and it's completely closed off or looks completely different than you usually see it with construction. And it can be hard for an autonomous car that has mapped out these conditions before to know how to adapt to that. Warning systems. This is more for the earlier levels, like maybe 1 through 4, where a person does need to be involved in the vehicle. This is basically when would it need to notify the person to take over the vehicle and what's the balance between that? You don't want to annoy the person with notifying them too much, and you want it to be safe so that you can let them take over the vehicle if needed. Sensor interference, this is these systems up here. It can be weather could cover certain sensors, say it's snowy and you can't see anything on the camera. And these radio waves the radar uses, if there are multiple autonomous vehicles in the same area, then their radio waves could interfere with each other and that might mess up the radar. And vandalism, I mean, everybody knows with, like, a smaller example of this would be like the delivery robots around college campuses. People mess with those all the time just because they find it entertaining and they know that they can. And if this were to happen on a larger scale, people could try to steal parts of these because they know there's nobody operating it. And they could even cover up the cameras or other parts that are needed for safety. And also, quote unquote, critical thinking, this is its ability to anticipate what people are going to do and make subjective decisions. So this is, say, if you're a normal human driving, then on the side of the road, you see like an elderly woman, you might be more cautious that she could fall over into the road, or if you see a child playing, you would know that they have a higher risk of running out into the road, and all the car might know is that there's a person waiting on the side of the road to cross, and they might drive the same as they might usually do. Some upsides, it has been proven in small cases in the studies that have been done that they have statistically fewer crashes than normal vehicles, and they will drive more smoothly because they don't have the same ignorance and mistakes that people make. There's also an accessibility and inclusion element to this because not everybody is physically or mentally capable of driving a car, and this could provide them an opportunity to do so without the need of help from other people. And lastly would be fuel efficiency, since this is pretty much a robot, it's going to do things smoothly and consistently, and it could know how to drive in the best conditions and not, stopping and going and accelerating unnecessarily like people might do. So that's one thing to think about with these. All right, on to the ethical dilemmas that come from this. First, I'm going to break these into pretty much partial automation and full automation. So partial automation includes levels 1 through 4 that we discussed earlier with SAE, and full automation will be when there's not a driver in the seat at all. So with the SAE levels of liability, so as you move through transferring off control from either the car to the driver or vice versa, there's a bit of a gray area in who would actually be responsible if an incident were to occur. For example, if a car knows that the weather conditions are bad, or it knows that there's a person or a vehicle close in front of them, and it notifies the driver that they need to take control to control this situation. Say the person doesn't react fast enough and the car crashes. It's hard to say legally whether the vehicle made this mistake or if it was the person at fault for not taking control sooner. There are also some human decisions in this. Say you call for a ride and you know the weather conditions are bad. You might have put a car in a position to be damaged. So ultimately humans started it, but was not really controlling the vehicle. Onto full automation. It has been seen many times that, especially most of these cars have been out in California. They have broken laws and cannot actually be, or at least as of the research that I read, they could not be held accountable or pulled over by cops or anything for breaking laws. So this is just, say a car makes a mistake and runs a red light or goes past a traffic guard or something that you're not supposed to do. Another common thought exercise with AI or just morality and ethics in general is the trolley problem. And this is a example just given, like say there's somebody driving. This is an adapted version of the trolley problem. This is more or less the number and type of person that might be getting put in danger based on the choices that somebody, this being an automated car, would make. And so these 3 examples here, it's asking between like who is more valuable. Is the driver more valuable than a pedestrian? And is the driver more valuable than multiple pedestrians? Or how, say a car gets into this situation, how is it meant to act? Because it's not a thinking being, you have to program it to make ethically gray or morally gray decisions, and that can be really controversial and problematic. Continuing the tragedy of the commons, this is just a concept that going off of cars prioritizing the passengers, which is generally the trend in these types of vehicles, because nobody is going to want to buy a car that isn't going to keep you safe. But if Tragedy of Commons describes that if all of these cars are only looking out for their own interests, then it ultimately makes everything more dangerous. The future, is this an evolution of travel or is it really just a gimmick? It remains to be seen. Some possible solutions of this could be that you would have driverless car lanes that they would operate in to keep them somewhat separate from people. Or you might have driverless car cities where they can only be in a certain area at a time. And this is more or less how they work right now. There are very few cities that actually allow drivable car or driverless cars, and most of them are out in California, and even some of them are being shut down right now. So it's a very limited amount of testing. Some more general things, just further research and driver training. So this could just be testing the cars more, and like if these were to become common, you could pretty much coach people to know how to interact with these cars, or if they have a partially autonomous vehicle to be more aware of taking over the wheel when they need to. Also alternative transportation, this is just forgetting the driverless cars. If you want to have more public transportation, maybe like a rail system or something. Uncertainty, there's limited data on this, like I said before, it's mostly just in California. As a niche application, this might not be something that's going to be actually taking over and being a huge thing. And even companies like Cruise are actually under investigation federally and at a state level for safety and skewing their statistics to make it seem like these are safer than they are. Thank you for your time. And are there any questions?
Think that it will be able to go full automation? I know right now Tesla is like big, like in like semi-automated. So you have like sensors and like auto braking, things like that. And then you have to like touch your hands to the steering wheel every so often to prove that you're there. Do you think with all the legal problems that would come with it, that they could go full automation?
The closest to full automation that we have right now is some companies like Waymo and Cruise in San Francisco. They have reached on the levels I discussed earlier. Let me bring it up. So there's 6 levels, and the closest we have right now is up to level 5. So at level 5, I actually visited San Francisco recently for an internship, and I saw these actually driving around. It freaked me out a little bit, but they have a limited supply of cars that you can call, and they will come pick you up without a driver, and you will just get in the back. It's like a taxi, but with no driver. And they can only operate in small areas and maybe on the highway a little bit and in the city. So not really any like strange terrain or anything. I don't know that it'll ever catch on to the point where there is nobody at, like, there's not even a way to drive these cars, because those, they drive themselves, but they can still be operated by people. So like you don't have to like tap it to confirm or anything. You just kind of hop in the car and it does its thing. I think it's more likely that we find a different method of transportation that's more convenient than this, than that people have fully automatic cars with no human capabilities at all.
To touch on the alternate transportation, where do we think that it like usage cases in this lie compared to, say, a more extensive train system?
Could you say that one more time?
Like trains in comparison to automated vehicles, yeah. How?
Okay, I think in some scenarios, like in more so in big cities, I think it makes sense to have, you know, like subway systems in New York and stuff. But just due to the nature of how big the United States is and how reliant we are on cars, there are people that drive an hour or more to get to work, that cars still remain pretty necessary. But I think you could implement like rail systems to an extent in mostly big cities, and that makes sense because there's a ton of traffic there. But I mean, we live in Tennessee, obviously, and there's pretty strange roads and people have to travel a lot to get to where they need to be. So I don't see cars being replaced anytime soon in that sense, but in in certain specific situations, I could see rail systems and other methods taking over.
Is anybody working on like a type of bus or anything like that, that's gonna be like, fully automated or partially automated?
Not to a large extent. Couldn't find very much research about that because I was wondering about maybe like 18-wheelers
Yeah.
or something like that being automated. And people have done tests on them, but nobody's working to like a large extent to actually introducing these as a product or method of actually moving things around. So it's mostly just in the idea stage right now, and it's not really close to being implemented. But if it were to be, then there'd be an entirely new problem of people losing jobs, because I know a lot of people rely on driving to make their living, and if autonomous vehicles were to take that over, and it would put a lot of people out of job.
I was about to ask about that. Like in general, what's your stance on like AI taking people's jobs? Like, what do you think is like the right balance of it? Do you have like an opinion on that?
I think it's hard to find a balance. I think I'm kind of a supporter of people utilizing AI in certain senses, especially as engineers. We know like things like, I mean, they don't do it very well, but you could try to use maybe something like ChatGPT to assist you with writing some code and generating some ideas. But I don't like the idea that's like an autonomous car might take somebody's job, like a trucker's job. And depending on the extent, it's hard to tell what impact that might have on people. I think at the moment, AI is certainly a threat. I think you're kind of getting to the point where AI could be an actual problem and taking some people's jobs. And I'm just hoping that it stays limited enough that AI remains more of a tool for humans than a replacement for them. It's hard to see where that's actually going in the future, but I think in the sense of driving, I think that's still a long ways away.
Would you personally say that the safety risks are worth having an autonomous vehicles on the road?
I think we need more testing to find that out, because the idea of it in concept, it seems that having driverless vehicles on the road, they can all perfectly, perfectly follow traffic rules and aren't going to be ignorant or emotional like humans are, because sometimes there are like rage incidents of people crashing, or somebody's just looking at their phone or something like that. And a lot of injuries and fatalities are actually from people looking at their phones and just being ignorant while they were driving. And these are all avoidable. So in that sense, having a driverless car could be worth it. But I think for that to be possible, I think every car on the road more or less would have to be a driverless car. Because the biggest problem with driverless cars comes between the interaction and between people in these vehicles.
I was wondering, do you know if like our automakers, are they trying to kind of work together to some extent on operating systems so that like kind of different manufacturers play nice with each other and like communicate well?
It's interesting. I haven't seen too much about the manufacturers. I think a lot of it's independent at the moment. I think they would need to work together later on to make sure they wouldn't interfere with each other. But at the time, it's such a new thing that I don't think they're really cooperating a ton. Like I think it's a Waymo in California. It's WAYMO, is the Google driverless car. So even in that sense, it's more so tech companies, it seems, are working on it than actual car manufacturers to build these. So I think it's a lot more just testing it right now, and I think everyone's kind of doing their own thing to try to figure out how they might be able to capitalize on this. But if it were to become a big thing, I would hope that it would be regulated and they would need to work together to meet some sorts of safety standards.